This is the voice of freedom. We are not one voice. We are many. We are your voice. But we can only be effective if you use your voice. Your voice. This is the voice of freedom. We will not hide from the truth. We will ask the hard questions until we are sure we have the truth. Welcome to the voice of freedom, where your voice will never be silenced.
Hello, folks. How are you tonight? Welcome to Launceston for our, second show in Tassie. And tonight we are in the Cock and Bull Hotel in Launceston. Got a group in here. Give yourselves a round of applause, folks, just so we know there's some folks here. Thank you very much for coming. Of course, don't have the cameras set up, so I can't be streaming all the great pictures to you. And out the back, too. I can't forget you out the back. We'll try and turn everything up so you can hear it all right. Yes, hello, Mal. I heard you. Hello. It's hard not to hear Malibu down the back. There you go. Round of applause for the lady who's helped organise all this, folks. That's Malibu. She's helped us get to town, which is great. We'll get some more chairs for you. You can do whatever you like. I'm just doing a show, if you don't mind. Okay, well, thanks, darling. That'd be great. We're old friends. So Launceston, lovely, lovely part of the world. And I've got to say, woke up this morning in Launceston and went for a bit of a drive. Boy, what a beautiful part of the world. And a beautiful day. When we woke up this morning, there was not a cloud in the sky. People online will get a bit of an idea of what I mean, because I've just thrown up a picture that I took this morning as we were leaving Penguin. Now, that's a bit of an idea of what the sky was like. Here's something beautiful. That's a part of Gun Plains, which we went through this morning. One of the most magnificent drives I've been on. We went up over the road, up over the range and into Penguin from there. Absolutely magnificent part of the world. And then the sky started getting a bit weird. Have you noticed anything today, folks? Yeah. Awful lot of aircraft in the sky tonight. I didn't know Tasmania had so many big jets flying down here. It seems impossible to believe because I can't get a ticket to get out. You know, seems to be a lot of planes coming down and not landing for some reason. Today, for whatever reason, they decided today was going to be the day where Tasmania copped it again. There have been trails in the sky since about lunchtime today, or a little earlier. Personally, I've seen about 6 jets today laying chemtrails right across Bass Strait. They seem to be laying them in line with the weather system that they're talking about at the moment. I'll just bring a picture that I've got that up so you can see online. You can see that huge weather system that is developing south of Tasmania or southwest of Tasmania and is moving to Tasmania at the moment. So if you can imagine, the jets today have been overflying Launceston, Devonport, Penguin, all the way down to Hobart, I suspect. They've been running up the spine of the island. And they are definitely not leaving contrails, folks. Definitely not leaving contrails. And in the beautiful, beautiful clear blue skies that we had today, it was very easy to see how those images that we saw, and I'll just bring some of those up. We talked about a few weeks ago how those chemtrail clouds, if you like, are reaching out. They've developed these tendril-like fingers and are searching for moisture in the air. And where do you find moisture in the air? Are the clouds. So I watched fairly intently today to see what clouds they were trying to spray around or attract into their little trail. And while there weren't many clouds, as we saw today, these trails just spread out and thin out like little fingers all over the place, gathering in more and more moisture. We saw that today. This is all going to be added to this big storm that is planned for tomorrow and going into the next few days as it makes its way across Bass Strait, through Victoria and up into southern New South Wales. Now, I heard somebody mention earlier today that there is potential for this storm to turn into a Category 3 cyclone. When was the last time you had a cyclone of any measure in Tasmania, folks? Must be climate change. It must be. I'm glad we've got a sense of humour still. That's fabulous. So quite a shock that will be, folks, to have a huge cyclone, I guess, in areas where cyclone housing is not built. So keep an eye on what's happening down at the southern edge of Australia, off the southwestern coast of Tassie. It is going to blow up, and over the next few days, they are expecting thunderstorms, I think, from tonight. Very cold conditions down through Tasmania and Victoria for the next few days. And when I say very cold, I think about 10 degrees is the top tomorrow. It might be 12 degrees for Hobart at least. And then further afield, it's probably only going to get colder. So they are working pretty hard at the moment on making weather a bit of an issue. And I was talking to Bruce, one of the farmers here, who's come into the show earlier, and he was telling me about his property and properties up and down the east coast of Tasmania at the moment. They are so wet, you can't get anything into a paddock, not even a huge tractor with a whole heap of horsepower. It's just going to get bogged. So that's the east coast of Tasmania, absolutely waterlogged. I had a bit of a look at Cataract Gorge. The water coming down there is very dirty, so that's obviously being washed down out of the hills. There is a lot of stuff floating in there, a lot of debris and all that sort of thing. So it's clear everything is being washed straight into the rivers, and every river that I've been over in the last 3 days since I arrived here is swollen. There is a lot of low-lying water in low places on farms and properties. I must say, it all still looks really beautiful, but it's no good if you're a farmer and you're trying to get out and look after your animals or your crops. One of the biggest issues that we are going to face with this challenge ahead of us, with what they're doing with these chemtrails, is simply we are not going to be able to get next year's crops in to be planted. They are engineering a food shortage, and that's why we need to start preparing for that now. Regardless of what we think, pray and hope will happen in the next few days and how much the world is going to turn around, it's quite clear that the damage that they have done to us over the last 12 or 18 months or so, not just physically, but also by compromising the weather systems, compromising the ability for farmers to go and plant or to grow or to maintain crops. We are going to have a period where we're going to find it very difficult to get food. Hopefully, it will be a fairly short period, but that's why it becomes extremely important for everybody to do a little bit of prepping. And I think last night, in North Motton, where Phil and his team, I thought Phil spoke magnificently last night, gave us all some great inspiration and ways as to how we can prepare ourselves for what's coming. And it's about learning new things. It's like coming to an event like this. Tonight, you're probably seeing people you've never spoken to or never seen before in your life. I would urge you to go and say hello, have a conversation with them before you leave tonight, because this is your community. This is the people who are reading the book like you are. They might be on a different page to you, but we're all here because we are essentially reading from the same book. We're all looking for answers, and we all have answers for each other. We just have to sit down, talk. I think, as Phil said last night, if somebody has a problem, the solution is in the room. You just have to let people know what the problem is. So that's where places like My Place come into being. If we can establish a My Place, like Darren Bergwerf has done in Victoria, you will find you'll gather people into that community that have various skills. Those skills can be put to use for the betterment of the community, the betterment of the group, the betterment of the region. And with other My Places gathered around in other parts of the state, I really think that together we can start to do some great things. I think the first thing we're going to need to have to start doing is looking after each other and those people who haven't believed what's going on, refuse to believe what's going on, think the IGA is going to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or at least during their normal opening times from here until eternity ends. That isn't going to be the case. And sooner or later, these people will get hungry. It's much easier to have them as friends rather than as very angry people coming through your door trying to steal your food. So I urge everybody to remember that we are here to help. We haven't come to gloat. We are here to help and try and put people back together again. It's a very difficult circumstance, I guess, we all find ourselves in, but no more difficult than those who were coerced into getting the jab and are now regretting it, and regretting it maybe in ways that they hoped wouldn't come to fruition. but now they are injured in some way, shape or form, potentially forever, a permanent injury. Myocarditis doesn't go away. Pericarditis doesn't go away. The only way to make it go away is to get a heart transplant, regardless how our media tries to minimize it. And I get asked a lot about our media. I think they'll be the last to change, folks. It will be when there simply is no other option and they cannot deny what is going on outside their window. And you've seen what lengths they will go to deny the bleeding obvious now. There is a story that I was sent earlier by one of the folks here, telling us about the Victorian state elections are now going to be overseen by a group tied up with the WEF, no, WEC, the World Economic Forum. What could possibly go? When did the World Economic Forum become anything to do with electoral commissions and vote counting? Probably about the same time as they became involved in vote rigging, I suspect. So how do the people of Victoria, how do the people of any state go forward with such doubt that their vote will even be counted? How does an election go forward like that when the public, and having spent some time in Victoria recently, there is no expectation from the people that I spoke to that there will be any change in the government because they expect the election to be stolen again. What hope does that give people? Why would you allow the election to go ahead? Wouldn't you just turn your back and say, well, why bother? Try and find me. And, then you can essentially go through the courts to fight the fine if that's what you wanted to do. Why would people bother? And why aren't people waking up? Why aren't people seeing things like the World Economic Forum is coming to count Victoria's state election? And in the headline, and I can actually share this one. Let me just see if I've got the right one up. I don't think I have. I've got a different one up, which is equally as upsetting if you're looking at it from a perspective of how badly things can change. Let me just throw up this little tidbit. So Australia has decided to pay the funeral expenses of those who've died from the mandatory vaccine. That's now being reported. So if you have someone who has potentially passed away from an adverse effect, I don't know what hoops you've got to pay for, but now there is a fund, which I believe is stretching up to about $9,000 to help you bury your loved one. It is, well, is it an admission? Is there something they should be starting to say to us, folks? Well, we're happy to pay for an injured person, a jab-injured person's funeral. Isn't that something of an admission of, well, maybe there's a few things wrong here? I mean, we're not seeing it in the stories as they're being written, but that is changing. We are seeing, particularly from one journalist, one mainstream media journalist, I'm talking about Joe Hildebrand from the Herald Sun and the rest of those sorts of banners. But Joe seems to think that he was always on our side. Does anybody remember Joe Hildebrand being on our side saying, oh, no, you shouldn't be forcing all of this?
Absolutely not.
No.
He wrote an article
saying
that Australians were not decent people.
There you go.
Did not get the jab. You are not considered a decent member of society.
Not considered a decent member of society if you don't get the jab, according to Joe Hildebrand, an article. Thank you, Malibu. Now he's saying, I've been saying all along that people shouldn't have been coerced, people shouldn't have been forced, this was wrong. So he's the first worm to turn. There will be more. I keep avidly getting out of bed every day, turning on that shock and schlock in the morning for television, just to try and see what lies and propaganda they're pushing today, and waiting for some sign that the wheel is turning, the worm is turning in those areas. But is it? Well, maybe. I've been asked what we're going to see when the media finally turn. I think you're going to see the likes of the Karl Stefanovics of the world and the Koshis of the world come out and admit that they were wrong, and then they're going to quietly disappear off your TVs. If you've noticed, there is a new crop of journalists popping up on your televisions. much younger, possibly they have been trained a little differently. Possibly they are ready to actually report fact rather than fiction, or fact rather than manipulated science, which is clearly an issue that we've all been facing for some time. What do you do when you hear the reply to one of our statements? Oh, just follow the science. It's not science, is it? No. When did science become emotionally affected? Because science now seems to be about how people feel about something rather than proving or disproving the ability of that thing. How did we get to that point? What are our kids being taught today? And I don't know that there are too many folks in here that have probably got kids in primary school, but shouldn't we as parents and grandparents be going to these schools and asking, seeing, really looking at the curriculums that our kids are being taught? Or is Tasmania doing what a lot of other parts of Australia are doing? Are they keeping their kids at home? Are they homeschooling now? Some? Yeah, a lot of homeschooling. Well, that's not dissimilar to a lot of other parts of Victoria, Queensland. Queensland, a lot of people homeschooling in Queensland, and a lot of people doing it in New South Wales as well. What do you think the benefit of homeschooling is? You learn something. Are the kids learning how you learned, or are you modernizing the way that you learned so that you can teach them better ways? But are you teaching them morals? Are you teaching them, trying the rights and wrongs? What is the greatest challenge in educating our kids today? Teaching them how to think, not what to think. That is probably one of the key statements I've heard on this trip. That's what kids, and not just kids, people in university, they're being told what to think. You're being given this way to analyze, that way to analyze, but you're not being shown all the ways you can analyze or break down a problem. You're being deliberately directed to the kind of solution pattern that they are propagating. Now, the only way that we can break that is by getting our grandkids, by getting our kids in a room and trying to educate them the way that we did. We learned. And we learned, I'm sure, I know there's farmers here. You didn't go to school to learn how to farm. You stayed on the farm to learn how to farm. You learned from the people who were already farming. There is an argument that says any apprentice is doing exactly the same thing. Well, that's great, except our apprentices are coming to first-year apprentice already believing they've forgotten more than they know to pass the apprenticeship before they've even started it. How do we rebalance the field? How do we bring those kids up or down a level, whichever way you want to look at it, so that they get to open their eyes and look at life a little bit more realistically? I guess this is the age-old problem. Your parents, have, like my parents said to me, you've got no respect. You'll grow up, you'll be deaf from all that rock and roll music you're listening to, and all that sort of stuff. How do we try and educate our kids without coming across as our parents fighting against rock and roll? This is the question I think we really got to apply some thought to. Because there is that big generational gap, 1 or 2 or even 3 generations gap. But you can be guaranteed that every one of those kids is being educated by one of these. Okay? So do we need to start looking at making programming specifically for this? Something that the kids can get in tune with, get hooked into, and learn from. Is that a way we should be coming up with it? I mean, there's plenty of great entrepreneurs in the IT space. Maybe we need to start looking at an educational tool. I know there are some educational tools for home education purposes that come through the internet. Maybe that's where we need to go. How do we, as a community, educate our kids better? Yes, imagination. Yep. Yep. That's right.
every day is a learning experience.
That's right.
So it's really only limited by your imagination.
And should those, okay, that's a really good point. It sounds like a Montessori type, Montessori school type arrangement where you let the kids learn at their own pace, you let them do what they need to do, and they will learn whatever it is they want to learn that day. You can build in certain, yeah. Yeah. So do we try and formulate our own curriculums for that, so that in places like my place, if we can form a my place and we get a community that has lots of kids in it, and odds are you're going to find one or two teachers who haven't gone back after they've been, thrown out of their job for not being jabbed. You might find a few teachers who are able to lend a bit of time, a couple of times a week, to help educate the kids. How do we start putting together those sorts of curriculums to share around the country? Because every state, every part of every state has something to offer. You guys farm different things to the people in Queensland, to the people in Western Australia, to the people in South Australia and Victoria. Although I must admit, there is a lot of familiarity between what you farm in here and what Victorians farm. Still love Tassie spuds, got to say, best spuds. I used to pick them in Koroit years ago, down near Warrnambool. My uncle had a spud farm down there. I spent all my Christmases filling up spud bags. I loved it. So yeah, we've got to try and get our kids educated. We've got to try and get them thinking independently and questioning those who are educating them. Do you think that's an important thing? Kids, one of the I know a 16-year-old boy, very smart young man, very switched on, very awake. Probably because his parents are two of the most awake people I've ever met. Now he's very switched on, doesn't force his opinions or his ideas or his beliefs down any other person's neck. But he's now attracting people to him because they're seeing things in the community, and he is becoming the go-to guy, if you like, to talk to about him for his age group. We need to find those kids in every community, and we need to help them so that they can educate their age group. Because as you can see, there aren't too many P-platers sitting in here tonight trying to hear what's going on or get a bit of a vague idea of what might happen. They don't care. They already know what's going to happen. We're too stupid to bother dealing with climate change. How the hell can we convince them of anything else? I mean, climate change is just so obvious, right? Well, you follow the science. That's what they said at school. It's so obvious. Well, let's, fingers crossed, hope that something like that can happen. What have we got to do to make that happen? Is our government going to make that happen? So what do we have to do? We have to stand up. We have to take responsibility ourselves. We have to grab our kids, and if that means taking them out of school and homeschooling them, or getting a group together, if you happen to live up one of those beautiful tracks in the Gun Plains, or any of the other myriad hills that are floating around here, hills and mountains, who's to say you can't get a school of 12 kids together, a motivated roster of parents and teachers or ex-teachers who are prepared to help, and a curriculum that is based on building both inner personal strength, moral character and fortitude, and a desire to help others. Because at the moment, am I being unfair if I was to speak in general terms and say young folks today don't really care for their communities and certainly don't care for their elders? Do you remember it being like that when we were young? I don't either. I remember it being very involved with elderly people in our community, through school even. We'd go out and do things in old folks' homes and sing songs and play instruments and do anything that we could to try and cheer them up, make them happy. And it was a great feeling when you walked into a nursing home and you just saw this huge smile appear on somebody's face who was sitting in a wheelchair and probably hadn't had a visitor in God knows how long. Our kids today aren't getting that experience because it's not deemed important by those educating them. So we need to find a way where we can educate those kids. How do we entice them to something like My Place? Because it all sounds a bit stiff. A lot of adults talking about how they don't believe in climate change and anything else. You know, not really my kind of place. I'd much prefer to go and investigate the science of climate change or something. So what do we do to attract kids? Is it as simple as going back to the days of a blue light disco? They were great. That's where Malibu had her first kiss. St. Moritz ice skating. Well, there you go. How wrong could that be? I had my first kiss at a blue light disco. So if we could do the blue light today means something else, but if we could organise something like that, a bit of a community dance for the young folks, something that might bring them around, something that we can be part of too, because, you know, we can all dance for a short period to some of that emu music, you know. It's all they do. Sound like a bloody emu. So, but it's a way of getting them into the community, getting them into help, getting them to learn, getting them to meet some of the older folks, and maybe some of the wisdom, some of the advice, some of the shortcuts in life that we've learned can be handed down. And through that community building process, they are going to grow up to be us in another 40 years, caring about the community. And hopefully there'll be a lot more people in the room who do want to care about the community, who want to see the community succeed. And your community is all we are focused on right now, because if we can make your community succeed, then everyone from here can make the community next door help succeed. And then that's going to flow through the whole state and through the whole country. I can see Darren Bergworth's vision of My Place being something magnificent right across Australia. There should be at least one of these in every town, at least one in every town. Can you imagine the good that could be created? Can you imagine you being the farmers who have got leftover product or product that the supermarkets won't buy? All of a sudden, markets are opening up to you. You can, you know, come in, swap food for different types of food or fruit that you've grown. You can sell it. You can give it away. You can do whatever makes you feel good with it, as long as you're helping the community, as long as what you're doing is benefiting others and bringing us together. Division isn't helping anybody. And right now, there is a lot of division in this whole story. You know, it doesn't matter which side of the coin you're looking on. There'll be somebody telling you should be on the other side of the fence, and here's the reasons why. And you can donate to me here, or you can join my subscription thing here, or you can do whatever. You know, I'm not going to go and get into the ins and outs of the whole freedom movement at the moment. There is a lot going on in it. There is a lot of things happening where some people are trying very hard to be stand up, be seen as leaders, and that's fine. If that's what they want to do, then I think that's fine. I personally believe our leaders have to come from us. Okay, not somebody who stands on the back of a truck and screams into a microphone. I think that our new leaders have to come from us. And we have to learn how to elevate the right people to those positions, because clearly we've screwed it up somewhere along the line. And I'm not saying that it's entirely our fault that we've screwed it up, because they've helped us screw it up. Their system puts forward the corrupt and promotes the corrupt. And if I'm honest, I'm not terribly involved in the electoral system. When elections come around, it's like, oh God, another 6 weeks of advertising or 8 weeks of advertising. And you get more angry at seeing Clive Palmer's ads in every ad break than you do the fact that Clive Palmer is even running. You know, we lose our focus. And that's what the media, the advertising is all about doing. They'll say it's to make you know all about, you know, one party's plan or one party's platform or the others. It's not. It's to help you get confused. It's to help you become apathetic about, well, you know, I've seen all the ads for all the parties and I don't want to vote for any of them. The only reason I'm going to vote is to avoid the $100 fine. How many people have done that? Yeah, heaps. And so we've lost our ability to respect our vote. So if we can't respect our vote, how can we respect the people that we're putting up to be voted for? If we don't care enough about our vote, we're certainly not caring about the person we're voting for, because we haven't bothered to go and learn a great deal about them. We haven't sat them down, listened to their platform, and decided whether or not they're going to work for us, or they are just another corporate stooge being inserted by the corporate party. This has to stop. We have to stop electing the same bastards into the job. It shouldn't be that hard, but then we get back to how often we can trust our vote count. So how do we trust our vote count? Well, you can't trust it when the WEC is coming to work, can you? You know, coming to count votes. The World Economic Forum. The only thing they've been able to count is our money into their banks. They've been able to count how much they've taken off every one of us, and they do that magnificently well. So I'm sure they'll be able to take a whole heap more votes and be able to count those too. We were talking about this earlier with Bruce and his lovely wife. This whole WEC voting thing raises one question in my head. Is this one of the markers we're meant to be looking at? Because doesn't it sound just too stupid to be true? There's a few no's, there's a couple of yeses, but that's true. That's increasingly exactly how it has been. If it sounds stupid, it probably is true. And that's the scary thing, particularly in the last 3 years, because some of the crap they've told us that we thought that'll never happen, we've lived through it and suffered through it. Some of us have died through it. So where are we left? Education and our own community. We have to get back to knowing our next door neighbours, knowing the people across the road, knowing the people around the corner, understanding we all have differences. Okay, your next door neighbour might like mowing his lawn at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning and your day off is 7 o'clock Sunday morning. Doesn't mean you've got to hate your neighbour. Just means you've got to communicate. We've lost the ability to communicate with each other. Now we grunt or we send text messages. And what's the biggest problem with sending a text message or an email? You lose context. You can't understand the words or how they're written in the way that the person intended them to be heard, so to speak. Something that's blasted out in love or anger as a text can come across as absolutely the opposite, depending on the perspective of the person who's reading it. So we have to get away from communicating by text message. We have to go back to communicating face-to-face, talking to people, picking up the phone. Phones aren't bad if you're communicating, if you're letting people know, if you are joining together, bonding and growing, then I think we've got a future going forward. But without that, I don't know where we're going to go. How do we bring our kids out of this funk? How do we bring those that have put us in this funk to justice? I mean, we're all hanging out at the moment for something huge to happen, hopefully out of America, supposedly out of America. We've heard recently Ricardo Bosi telling us that this month is going to be, everything's going to happen in the next month. So I take that to be November. He says it's all going to happen in November. What happens when it doesn't happen in November? What happens if this 29th was the big marker for us in Australia? The 29th of October meant to see big things happen. What's the problem I'm finding with giving out dates and saying big things are going to happen is, what is the definition of big? Big to me would be Biden being arrested. Yeah. Big to me would be a military announcement, full bird colonel or a 5-star, 4-star general walking out and explaining what happened with the 2020 election. That would be big. But would it also be big news if Donald Trump got back on Twitter? So it's big news to those of us that are aware that 45 has been off Twitter for God knows how long and was never going to be brought back. We're aware that, yep, back on today, the 29th in America. Yep. He came back on the 29th. So is that big? Is that a marker? That's the fun part about this business. You know, I would say it is. I would say that's a big thing for a man who is going to not only be banned from Twitter for life, but banned from life for life. I think it's a pretty big thing that he's now back in. I find it very interesting the way he has got back in and the issues that Elon Musk is facing in various other aspects of his life. Doesn't seem to be facing that with Twitter. Have you heard that there is a plan afoot with him and Twitter to somehow convert Dogecoin into cash through Twitter? So it's going to become a pay platform. I don't know if there's any truth to that. I have no idea at all. I know he's been pushing Dogecoin for years, and I don't know anything about Bitcoin, but if you do know somebody about Bitcoin, maybe that's something worth looking at the moment. Also, something worth looking at the moment is silver and gold, precious metals, because we do really believe that market has been suppressed for a very, very long time. All the indications are that the World Economic Forum will probably have its hands full trying to put the economy of the world back together rather than count the Victorian election votes. But those Victorian election votes could be very important because of the power that they will gain through the Victorian government for helping them, so to speak. So the WEC is going to play an interesting role in a couple of different areas this month, I think, and that's why I'm not terribly concerned about them counting Victorian election results just yet. I don't think we're going to get that far. I really pray to God that we do not get that far. There needs to be something happen before the 26th of November. But if it hasn't happened by the 8th of November, in America, the 9th here, then I'm absolutely at a loss as to what we've been reading, listening to, watching for the last 3 years. I'm completely at a loss. And I think that's probably the biggest thing the white hats are going to have to face if they exist. I mean, we get asked that every day, but how many here are on side with the white hats, believe they're existing? Yeah? Yep, so better than half. That's pretty good. But the rest of you are a bit unsure about the white hat, black hat thing. I can understand that. I've read a lot, seen a lot, and spoken to a lot of people. I do tend to believe there are white hats working, but we have no proof. Outside of what Ricardo Bosi tells us, we have no proof. Oh, okay. Well, we would need to start 10 hours ago to fully explain that. But suffice to say that there is a great deal of disinformation, white hats, black hats, and Q. Are you aware of the Q phenomenon? Well, white hats and black hats come out of Q, essentially. Black hats are the baddies, white hats are the goodies. Okay, like an old cowboy movie? Right. So there you go. That makes it a bit easier. Yes. That's right. The mainstream media are telling everybody that the black hats are just the same as everybody else and that the white hats are, in fact, the baddies because, the white hats are those horrible people that, wrap their heads in tinfoil and start screaming about being jabbed and all that sort of stuff. Absolutely. Much rather wear a tinfoil hat than a mask. And I don't think you're alone in this audience here. There's plenty of us just like it. So what's going to happen in the next little while? I honestly have no idea. None of us really do. Ricardo Bosi tells us that it's all going to happen next month. So I'm going to be watching with bated breath what happens next month. It has to happen before the midterms as far as I'm concerned. You cannot move forward in this with what's gone on in the last 2 years particularly. You cannot move forward unless the 2020 election is sorted, and I don't think they can have the midterms until that has been sorted. I know that there is an awful amount of scrutiny going into the count of this supposed election coming up, and I know that there is a similar level of scrutiny supposedly going into the Victorian election. But who knows? At the end of the day, the information is coming from folks just like us who sit down, read, and try and analyze. That's all we can do. Use a logical brain, a logical mind, remove the emotion, and start looking for the truth. And I think a lot of people in Tasmania are starting to do that. Certainly up north in North Motton and around Penguin, there are plenty of people who are very, very aware of what's going on, and they are doing everything they can to try and alert other members in their community. Now, that doesn't mean you've got to harass people. That doesn't mean you've got to drive them away or drag them along to a community event. It just means you've got to keep planting the seed, telling them what sort of a great time you had, the connections you made, the jokes you told, the fun you had. They'll come around eventually. They'll come around and feel the love and the community that a My Place kind of thing generates. Now, the place that Phil and the boys have put together in North Motton may as well be a My Place. It's just a different name. They've done it a little differently. They focus on different areas. They're focused on keeping their properties prepped, keeping their families safe, and keeping themselves able to function and whatnot moving forward under just about any circumstance. I know there are a lot of mainlanders who are like that too, but how many folks here are prepped and ready to go? So there you go, about half a dozen. So that's not real flash. So I hope you're well prepped, folks, because odds are you're going to get a few people here tonight that you're going to make friends with when you meet them on the way out, and they're going to turn up at your place looking for a feed because you've stuck your hand up and said, "Oh yeah, I got plenty." Okay, yeah. So, and that may well be something we have to be careful of in the not too distant future too. Owning up to what you do have and being a bit too generous and finding people who managed to go and get their gun license before they were all taken office, turning up at your front door. So, yeah, there are things that we certainly do need to be aware of. There are things that we need to work on with our community. But most of all, folks, the thing I think we need to work on are our kids. We need to make them better human beings, whether that's taking away, access to things like this. I actually think the mobile phone is going to change fairly significantly when quantum phones and quantum technology comes into play. I think it'll be much harder for kids to be distracted by the likes of YouTube. I mean, we've all done it. That's probably why more than half of us are here. We've all fallen down a YouTube rabbit hole or a Rumble or a BitChute rabbit hole. And we're still trying to find those answers that we didn't find from school or from the media or from our group of friends who, when we asked them for answers, shunned us, called us names, shamed us, and then walked away from us. We're going to have to build a bridge back to them too. So start with our kids, build that community, give them somewhere to be, give them something to do, even if it's just painting the walls of the factory you set it up in or the shed you set it up in. Make I suppose occupational health and safety will have me for this, but we used to make hay tunnels when I was a kid through haystacks. That kind of thing. It's not hard to keep kids entertained. It's not hard to get them away from an iPad or a phone. You've just got to be a little bit creative. And if we can educate them in that process too, like preserving food, giving a kid who's got an interest in knives, a knife and a whole heap of fruit to cut up. All right. And then teach them how to stoke a fire so that they can start, sanitizing glass jars, how to warm water, how to boil water, why you've got to boil water, why it's important to make sure that these things are sanitized. Make it an adventure for a kid and they will learn for life. Make it a task, and they'll fight you every step of the way. So, there are ways and means. We just have to be lateral thinkers to bring them in. And we are already pretty lateral thinkers because we're here, all right? We haven't stopped at the problem. We haven't believed in the problem. We've looked for a solution to the problem. We've looked and gone around it. We've gone under it. We've gone over it. We haven't let the problem stop us. At the moment, I believe that kids see a problem and do that, and that's not necessarily looking at the solution to the problem. That's just going down the next rabbit hole that YouTube teases up for them. So I think we've got to start looking at kids. Well, I think we've got to start looking at education, at educating our kids, whether that be at home or in suitably approved situations with a suitably approved curriculum. That doesn't mean that kids can't learn about, bad things or the fun things they would probably call it. But it does mean that our curriculums need to change to a point where there is more of a community focus, less of a focus on self, more of a focus on us. And if we have more of a focus on us, we will find there is a unified solution. When we have more of us in the room and we shout out, we have a problem, the solution will be in the room. It is every time. The bigger the problem, the more people you have in your room, the more solutions you will find. And you choose the one that suits you best. Our life is all about choices. All right? Everything we do, whether you choose to brush your teeth in the morning or at night before you go to bed, whether you choose to have an argument at work with somebody or not, everything has a consequence. Everything has a consequence. And the decision that we take today may have the consequence of saving our kids' lives in the future and saving their kids' lives and their kids' lives and their kids' lives. It is about being able to stand up and find a way of getting our kids, because we're not going to live that much longer. In the big scheme of all of this, let's be honest, say most of us have got maybe 30, 40 years left in us. I'm being generous, especially in my case. So if we have that little time, we cannot fix everything. We need those that come after us to have the same mindset, to have the same desire for a great community, a fulfilled life, and hopefully, if all of the other stuff that's supposedly coming our way comes our way, that will be made easier. But it won't be any easier to make decisions if the morals and the way that their decision-making process has been perverted currently still exists. They're just going to make the same decisions down the track, and we're going to be doing this again in another 1,000 years, having this same conversation about why we didn't get it right last time. So I would urge everybody, if you've got kids, if you've got grandkids, just quietly get them into doing old school things. Teach them old school ways. Teach them old school thinking and make it fun for them, because, old stuff can be fun if you find the right way of doing it. And all it takes is a little bit of lateral thinking. And letting them go and get dirty, letting them go out, run around, break an arm. Kids today are so wrapped in cotton wool that, a green apple will give them a cold. So we have got to let them. We've got to make them. It's not so much letting them anymore. Now they don't want to go outside. They live their life through that screen. That's how they. Oh well, gee, I might like to skydive one day because I saw that. I wonder what percentage of kids wind up going off and doing skydiving because they saw it on YouTube. I wonder how many more might go and get into. Last night, for instance, Phil was talking about a talk they're going to be having shortly on blacksmithing. Now, if I was a kid and I had the opportunity to play with fire, hammer, anvil, and make a knife, I'd be all over it. All over it. Now, it's not for every kid. It's not for every kid. But it certainly is for many kids. And when you've got a kid who's learning how to stoke a fire, heat up metal and beat the crap out of it, you've probably got them for 3 or 4 days. And in that 3 or 4 days, there is so much other stuff you can teach them around that that will stick with them forever, that they will carry forward with them into their adulthood, into their journey, and hopefully into their family and into their family's family. We have to engender that spirit in them. And, well, today, Paul and I were driving from Ulverston back, and we sort of went the long way. We weren't in any great hurry. I wanted to have a bit of a look at the beautiful countryside. There was no rush. We had a great conversation. We had a few. Everybody has different points of view on things. One of the conversations that we had today was how nice it is to be able to have a conversation where we have a different point of view, and we don't argue about it. It's nice to have a conversation with somebody who's got a different point of view. It doesn't matter that you don't agree with it. The fact is you're learning things from it. And if it's, and I guess unless it's one of those really stupid conversations where, the topic is not really going to help any of us, but by and large, not adversarial conversations, but perspective changes are a good thing for people. If you can change the perspective of someone, then it changes the way they look at the world. So if we can change the perspective of our kids from this to something a little more adventurous, then we are going to benefit from it. And we are going to be responsible for them totally in that area. We have to be responsible for them in their moral growth area, because you cannot trust the people at the schools who are currently teaching them, because they're not teaching them to be moral people. They're teaching them to be feeling type people. If you have your feelings hurt, you can go and change the world. All you got to do is yell loud enough. It doesn't matter that the science doesn't back you up. It's the feelings that matter. We have to change that thought. Doesn't mean that your feelings are less powerful, but feelings are feelings. Emotions are emotions, but as we move forward, we are going to be required to make decisions that aren't based on feelings, that aren't based on emotions. We are going to be made to make decisions for what is best for the group, best for the collective, best for the community at both a local level, a state level, a national level, and a global level. When some of the revelations that we suspect we're going to get are in the public domain, and one of those ones we sort of spoke about last night, which was the flat Earth theory. Some of those theories are so divisive to some people. Their cognitive dissonance just kicks in. They immediately get aggressive. They have to have an argument about it or call you names because they believe something different to what you do. At the end of the day, what they believe, what you believe, doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference if the world is flat. It won't make one iota of difference. It's not going to make anything you grow faster. It's not going to make any distance you travel go quicker. It's not going to have any impact on your day-to-day life at all if you discover tomorrow the world is flat. None. Or am I missing something? Is there, no? About the only impact it would make on me is I would be very pissed off that we've been lied to for all these years, and I want to know why. That's the only question that I have out of the flat Earth theory. Why? If it is flat, why lie to us about it? And the next question is, if they're going to lie to us about that, what else are they lying to us about? And that's how everything. That's exactly right. That's the thing with lies. You can't trust a liar because you might have to make a decision based on a liar's word, only to be discovered that you've made the wrong decision because you were lied to. So we've got to weed those folks out. We've got to try and inject a little intestinal fortitude into our kids rather than a 5G SIM card on a new phone that they have to have tomorrow. Apple are going to release a new phone. I've got to have it, Mum. That's how it is. We've got to stop the I want gimme, 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 gimme. And we've got to change that to, can I help, can I help, can I help? Can I give you, can I give you, can I give you? Because if I can give to you, you're going to give to somebody else. Your community is going to grow, and your community is going to give to the wider people, the wider community, the wider state, the wider country, the wider globe. We just need to line up. And like I say, I don't think we're going to be the ones that finish this, but we have to be the ones that instills it in our kids, because nobody else is going to. Nobody is going to. And that's what they've planned for us. They've planned, the courts have made it impossible. The child stealers go in, they'll rip the kids out of a family. What happens to the grandparents? The grandparents either wind up with some custody or no access at all. There's no halfway. You either get some minor access because your son or daughter happens to be involved in this. They can't turn up and see the kids for whatever reason. But because you want to maintain that relationship, you do. Only to have it spoiled by somebody else in the family who has more access to the kids or whatever. We have to stop that kind of thing happening. The family unit has been broken down deliberately by the courts. They are deliberately splitting us up. They are deliberately putting the pressures on you, your relationships, and your kids. And they're doing it so that they can get access to your children. That's the scariest bit about the whole thing. Halloween coming up tomorrow. This is the worst time of the year for kids to go missing, never to be seen again. Now, why? I mean, who here celebrated Halloween when they were a kid? No, not one person. Not one. The only thing we knew about Halloween was when the cartoons came on and there was a scary-looking pumpkin head on it, and it was something funny that happened in America at some stage, and kids went and got dressed up and looked like ghosts. It meant nothing. How did Halloween get to Australia and become this mad thing? I mean, you can't walk into a Kmart and not, fall over skulls, fall over pumpkin heads, fall over ghosts, fall over this, that, for the other. We've got kids wanting, in fact, I know a 7-year-old boy who threw a fit because he wanted to go out trick-or-treating as Chucky. You know, the doll that stabs thing. I know another one who had to go to school as It, the clown. Now, how does a 7-year-old know about It? Well, stupid parents. Yeah, go ahead, watch that movie. Now, I don't know who in their right mind would let a 7-year-old watch a horror movie, especially like something like It. You're going to have an issue with clowns for the rest of your life. So, but not this one. He embraced it, and he had to go as It for Halloween this year. And of course, what's the parents do? They go out, they hire a makeup artist. Yeah, they go and get a whole clown suit made up for him, like It. And his father happily presents him with a great big rubber knife about that long. Right? Yep, that's going to be your outfit, son. Away you go. Yeah. For those at home, we could just dress up as Joe Biden, and that would be just as scary. So how do we combat those sorts of parents? Because they're your sons and daughters. How do we combat those sorts of parents? You've got to take back your power. That's exactly right. And we have to find a way of taking it back in such a way that it doesn't look like we're taking it back. It just looks like we're doddery old people trying to help out, which we are trying to help out. I'm not the doddery part, but we are trying to help. But kids, whether they be yours or your grandkids, are very smart. They don't like being led along to things. They are very smart, and they will resist if it's down a path they don't really want to go. So that's where being creative comes from, doing a little bit of lateral thinking, making things an adventure, a challenge. And, I guess we get to the reward at the end of it. There always does need to be some kind of a reward, I suppose. Kids have been educated that way. If you do well, you'll get something. How many times have we seen a kid in a shop somewhere, mum saying, yeah, okay, well, that's the lolly I said you could get because you went to class or you went to school or you went to soccer training or you kicked a goal or you did whatever. There is always a reward system where the kid winds up with his hand out and something gets put in it. Why can't we go back to the reward system of just feeling good for helping somebody? You know, for turning up in an old folks' home, sitting down and chatting with a lady or a man who doesn't have any family left or they don't come to visit for 10 minutes and seeing the joy that comes from that experience. And what might you learn from talking to someone who's in their 90s? I love talking to old people, really old people. My grandfather was 96 when he died. My only real regret is I'd only just got into radio and I didn't have the ability to sit down with him and record his memories, because his memories were 100% spot on, 100% clear. He was very switched on. In fact, lots of university types used to come and ask him because he was the oldest guy in the region. Some people might have heard here of the story off Victoria of the mahogany ship. The great sunken mahogany ship, be worth billions of dollars or something, they said. Well, my grandfather was alive at the time the mahogany ship supposedly sank and lived in that area. And he remembered the stories of the saving people that night and all that. So yeah, he had a very clear memory. He also had great stories that never get shared because kids don't sit down long enough to listen to them. That's a great regret of mine. So maybe we need to start recording our stories and telling them as bedtime stories for kids, replacing our name and putting something else in. Lateral thinking. That's what I'm trying to get to. We need to get them away from the fairy tales because we know what the fairy tales are doing. They're just programming them, right? So maybe there's a writer amongst you. Maybe there's a storyteller amongst you. Hear enough stories, start telling them, start writing them down, get the kids involved, get them writing and telling their stories. Make it a communal thing around a bushfire, or not a bushfire, a campfire. Keep the bushfires to yourself. Around a campfire. Better still, make it a couple of campfires and have a campfire lighting competition or education, you know? How do you get kids to light fires with wet wood? What myriad ways are there to get yourself a fire if you haven't got a match? This sort of education is the stuff you can hook kids into. Not every kid, but you'll get a lot of them. And for the ones that you don't get, they'll be the ones coming inside and talking to your writers because they're not interested in going out and being the bushcrafty type, but they are storytellers. They're just young ones. They haven't learnt all the skills yet. So find those people in your community, welcome them into your community and get your kids into your community and help them, educate them, excite them, entertain them. And I think as we go forward, we're going to win if we haven't already done so. I mean, if you listen to all the rest of the world, we've already run. But I don't know. I like having a plan B, and I think plan B has to be our kids, and we've got to work hard. Yep, absolutely. I think I've probably prattled on enough for one night. I just want to thank you folks for taking your time out tonight to come and sit here in the Cock and Bull in Launceston. What a great pub. Can I tell you folks, if you are coming to Launceston, there are a number of great hotels. I have been into a couple of them. The beer is cold. The Bogues is brilliant. Thank you very much. And Bogues is actually made here in Tasmania, not on the mainland, I'm told. Just down the road. Yes, and we might go and visit it tomorrow. I'm just saying. After breakfast. Just after breakfast. They wouldn't let me in if I wasn't jabbed. They will now? They will now. Oh, well. It's beer. I could just buy a Bogues here and be done with it. That's true. Yeah. And the barmaids were very nice to me on the way in early. They showed me where to come. So, yeah, very good idea. All right, folks, we will wrap it up. Thank you very much for coming tonight into Launceston. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful to meet so many great people. One of the best parts of what I'm doing at the moment is coming around and meeting so many wonderful people in so many different areas. It's a pleasure to meet such switched on people, such enlightened folks, and such concerned folks, because without the concern that you show, without the switched on light that you have shining onto the truths that we are telling, and more particularly shining onto the lies that they are telling, I think we're in a pretty good place moving forward. We've got a lot of eyes watching. We've got a lot of folks talking, a lot of folks doing for the first time in a long time. We've always been good talkers, but now with blokes like Phil Jewell up north and Malibu down here, and if you haven't met Malibu yet, there is a doer, folks. You go and talk to this lady, give her an idea, or better still, she'll give you one of her 100, and get a doer in your midst, all right? Because doers excite people. Doers get other doers around them. And when you get a lot of doers in one place, you wind up with a Lions Club. I'm sorry, you wind up with a community organization. You wind up with a community organization that can really make a difference in your community. And that's what we have to be. We have to be the difference in our community. All right, folks, have yourself a great what's left of the weekend. And I'll talk to you again tomorrow night from Mornington Inn. Yes, we're doing Magna Carta tomorrow night. It is Monday. I'm losing track of the days. It's all fun. Thanks, folks. Really appreciate your time coming in tonight and for supporting the Voice of Freedom like you do. It's no easy task doing what we do, running around the countryside. It's just as well I don't have a wife. That's all I can say. I do have a daughter that I'm missing. She's having a great time at the moment in Victoria. But yes, so we will continue running around the country as long as you folks want to have somebody in town to have a talk to. We'll be very happy to come, and we will come back and help you build your community if you want us. If you want to start at my place, then we can help you out with that. Come to my website, vofhq.com. Go to the downloads page. You'll find a whole heap of information from Darren Bergwerf's My Place about how you set a My Place up. If you have a shed that you can convert or use as a community space, maybe you've got some land, 15, 20 acres. You don't mind if community members come out, plant their own crops in there and farm that. That is the way that you can then start having weekend markets, attracting new faces, new places, and hopefully new ideas. Build your community up. My Place is a great way to begin this community building process for all ages. For all ages. And you have amongst you here, I'm sure there's some people who've got some land that might be able to be used for this. If it's not being used for anything else at the moment, what's it going to hurt to turn it into a crop that can be used for the community good? Maybe there's a few properties. Maybe there's a few crops. Who knows? Within 10 years, you could be feeding not just Tasmania, but half of the country. All because you've built a community of doers, not watchers, not thinkers, not consternators. You've built a community of doers, and that's what we need. And we've built the kids up as well. Thank you once again, folks. Look forward to talking to you again from Hobart tomorrow night. Cheers.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?